fire-breathing underworld serpents, giant shadow demons, a dragon. Dude, I'm not kidding when I say that there have been some truly massive lore reveals lately in the One Piece manga, especially with the Harley text or the giant mural here detailing the true history of the One Piece world. And contrary to what you and probably some other people think, there is something else that Oda has been teasing that has left me super interested in the future of the series and what the One Piece really is. I'm obviously excited about finding the Last Road poneglyph, or what will eventually happen when Emu and Luffy, or Emu and Blackbeard, or Emu and Akainu really go to war. But there is one other thing that I'm really hung up on, and I want to talk about it with you today. The Eternal Flame, which is also probably the Forbidden Sun from the ancient lore. And today I have 5 very different and unique ideas for you what the Eternal Flame and the Forbidden Sun could actually be, ranging from pieces of a star to a crazy ancient nuclear reactor. And let me just tell you that I'm unbelievably confident in the last one of these, as it is my personal headcanon already right now until someone can prove otherwise. Now, of course, we do need to go over what we're actually talking about here, because whatever I propose will have to match up what we do know for a fact from the story. So, for starters, I'm pretty certain that Oda has shown us one interpretation of it already. In fact, we can see it right here in the hands of what I think we all can assume is a giant demonic version of Emu, and it does seem to be the main focus of the Harley text in general, which to me suggests that it might have probably taken the form of a quite literal flame. And if you're not sure about that, don't worry, because Oda actually already showed us something very similar based on this idea in the series already, because Vegapunk modeled his mother flame after what he assumed it was. And since we saw this in the manga, I think we can surmise that this fire-like appearance is more or less accurate. Now, something very important to note here is that Vegapunk's mother flame is in some sort of liquid, really weird, yet still is on fire. And I think that might actually be insanely important. Now, my guess is that it's either unstable and this solution here is a stabilization agent, or it's so powerful that if it wasn't contained in some literal water, it would spread like, you know, wildfire. All right. Now, there's a good chance that the true Forbidden Sun might need to be contained in that very same way. Maybe even what makes it so forbidden. And this leads me to my first culprit here. Something that I think makes a lot of sense with a lot of the lore drops that we're getting about how important the Lunarians and the gods of the One Piece world really are. Because to me, one very likely option is that the Forbidden Sun itself could just straight up be a Lunarian's back flame, potentially the most powerful Lunarian's flame, that of Nika. Now, in case you don't know, Oda has been drawing connections between the quote-unquote gods and the Lunarians quite often before. When King is revealed to be a Lunarian, Marco, for instance, remarks that Whitebeard told him of an ancient and powerful race that used to live atop the Red Line, known as the Gods. Then Queen doubles down on this statement, calling King a god as well, and the Lunarians are also a sky race, a subset of races in One Piece that are very closely associated with multiple gods and deities, as we, for example, learned about in Skypiea. And we also know that the current residents of the Red Line, the Celestial Dragons in Marijua, are currently known as the gods of the One Piece world too, so it's pretty clear, I think, that if you lived up there, calling you a god is just the natural thing to do in this world. Then we actually also see the sky races coming down from the moon, almost like a god would descend from the heavens as part of Enel's cover story. Speaking of which, that's a character who refers to themselves as a god as well. As you can see, it's just way too many tie-ins and connections between Lunarians and sky races being divine according to Oda, so I kind of feel like we need to acknowledge this fact in this video as well. And obviously, we do know of an ancient key god figure, Nika, and so if we are to use the other divine figures for reference, I think there's a pretty logical conclusion to be made here that Nika could be a super powerful Lunarian who came down and brought advanced technology from the moon to the One Piece world many thousands of years ago. And if he was a Lunarian, then he would in fact have an eternal flame right with him, right there between his shoulder blades, because that would be a insanely powerful flame. Now, I'd like to remind you that we actually do see King do some absolutely insane stuff with it in Wano, and while I can't say for certain he's just a pretty average Lunarian, I think, I doubt that he is the strongest one to have ever lived, right? So To me, it's a pretty fair theory. Nika comes down to the planet and somehow separates his flame to power the new civilization down here. And I could see this being the case for sure, but I don't think it's gonna be the most likely one. Because unless Nika was just straight up massive, his flames would be probably way too small and wouldn't line up with all the little fragments that the people carry or the big flame that is carried by the demon figure on the left side of the mural here. But hey, then again, if Luffy starts picking up objects and making them super big with his fruit powers, then there's definitely a chance, and Nika was able to do something similar with his fire as well. And seeing as Vegapunk created both the Mother Flame and even created clones of the Lunarians in the form of the Seraphim, I do kind of see a threat that Oda is suing here, and this could just straight up be the case here. Now you might have noticed though that there is one big hiccup with this idea in my opinion, and that's the fact that it's kind of hard to explain when you look at another piece of evidence surrounding the Forbidden Sun. Because when you really dive into the subject, I kind of realized that based on its depiction in the mural here, the Eternal Flame is very likely contained somewhere underground. Right here in the mural's right half, which appears to depict the first world of the One Piece era, and in it, we do see people riding a sort of pulley elevator into the ground and then coming back up with these star-like fragments that they carry a little while later. And to the best of our knowledge, these seem to also be pieces of the Forbidden Sun, and seeing as the Harley refers to mankind touching the Forbidden Sun, a depiction of people, regular humans, carrying star-like objects from the core of the planet seems like a very on-the-nose depiction of what's actually going on here. Now, I specifically wanted to draw attention to this because it may just reveal how powerful this Forbidden Sun really is, as it appears from the Harley text that humanity was warned by whomever not to use it and then suffered for their ignorance and desire to grow anyways. Because the text literally says, mankind succumbed to their greed and touched the Forbidden Sun. And you know what that sounds like to me? Capitalistic greed. Something that does fall in line, I guess, with the giant industrial city we see, which may just be the Ancient Kingdom. And Imu, might just be a robber baron confirmed, guys. All jokes aside, since we're talking about industry and the fact that the Forbidden Sun is actually underground, it seems, I actually kind of prefer the next option over Nika's flame here. Because the second idea is that the Forbidden Sun could be a straight up hyper-massive nuclear reactor inside of the One Piece planet. Now this kind of crazy sounding idea hedges its bet on one specific part of the lore reveal that we got. And in all fairness, it's a pretty important part when you look at things on paper, because I'm talking about the idea that the Ancient Kingdom was incredibly advanced. I mean, seriously. Look at what Vegapunk has been doing on Egghead with hard light, 3D projections, and lightsabers. Technology that, by the way, we don't have, and somehow even then he still says that they are leagues behind what the actual Ancient Kingdom was capable of. Which, when you really let those words sink in, is just truly absurd if you ask me, because that means that they were like teleporting and stuff, I guess. But also come to think of it, that I guess would line up pretty well with the Abyss that Imu and the Holy Knight seem to use, so I guess that's probably pretty accurate. Anyhow, the idea here is that the Ancient Kingdom created actual nuclear fusion, a nearly unlimited source of power. And even though we're still far from perfecting it, it is actually possible and researched in our real world under the right circumstances. And it actually lines up really well also with what we know about the Eternal Flame and its little buddy, the Mother Flame, which we got on Egghead Island as well. And it actually fits in nicely with the dream theme of One Piece and the fantasy elements, because nuclear fusion is actually still very much impossible for us real humans to achieve as well. It is still a dream for humanity at the moment because of two key things: temperature and containment. You see, achieving fusion requires incredibly high temperatures, close to around 100 million degrees Celsius, and immense pressure, which only can be produced by putting a lot of energy into a system at the moment, which basically turns molecules into plasma that then gets so hot that they actually start fusing. And then that plasma needs to be isolated from the barriers of the reactor by using magnets, because if it touches or spreads into them, the heat disbursement would cool and prevent the fusion from ever happening. As I mentioned, it's not possible yet for us to actually replicate and use it safely in the real world. The only, reactors that do exist take up way more energy than they still put out, but there is one key place in our universe where fusion happens all the time: stars. As you might guess, stars like our sun are incredibly hot, and their colossal size creates the amount of gravity necessary to achieve exactly that. And actually, before I forget, do me a favor, write that down or remember it, because I'm gonna loop back to the entire star thing after the reactor stuff once again later, but that's not important quite yet. The reactor is, and well, I think that Vegapunk may have straight up cracked it in One Piece as well. I mean, look at what we really see with his mother flame. It's isolated from the walls of its chamber, it's very clearly creating an insane amount of power for the entire island, and it is a burning flame on top of all of it. But what if it's not a real flame, but just plasma? To me, this looks like a small fusion reactor, and that would inherently mean the Forbidden Sun is also a fusion reactor, just, on a much, much larger scale. I don't know, maybe for example, it could be the size of the planet? I mean, really think about it. If it was massive and inside of the Earth, that would create an absurd amount of power, but it could also be contained and hidden away from everything else. This could explain why people are being seen going underground in the mural here, as they are getting batteries or vessels for that power and bringing them back up to power their own city and industry. And if you're not thinking, oh boy, like the excess heat from that would just straight up burn and crisp the entire planet, you might be right. So wouldn't it be super convenient to, I don't know, flood the entire planet and water cool it? And maybe when things go out of hand, the flooding was increased to truly submerge and either extinguish the reactor or just make it straight up impossible to reach due to the crazy amount of pressure and barrier to access it. And I actually really like this idea because it could also explain some of the other oddities and new things that we do now know are associated with the Forbidden Sun. Namely, for example, the Hellflame Serpent. This gigantic snake seems to have come out of the ground and appeared when the Forbidden Sun was being misused, at least according to the older of the Harley text, stating that it appeared after the humans touched the Forbidden Sun and helped bury the world in darkness. Now, this story actually mimics another very iconic kaiju in fiction, and I don't think that it's that big of a coincidence. And yes, I'm gonna say exactly what you're thinking. I think that Oda might have just created his own version of Godzilla to protect the world from nuclear power. And what can I say? The evidence does kind of nicely line up for this idea. After all, it's no secret that Oda is a Japanese mangaka, and Japan has a very clear and dark history with nuclear power and nukes and, creating media that is very anti-nuclear energy as a result. The most iconic of which is, of course, the king of the beasts, Godzilla. And his purpose is to basically represent the fear and unrelenting power of nuclear energy. And modern interpretations show him as a creature that serves as nature's wrath when humanity gets too big-headed and either taps into a power or substance that is unnatural and could harm the entire world. And if you wanted to compare it to mythology, it's basically a perfect example of the Icarus story as well. And why would that now be important, you ask me? Well, first off, great question. Let me take you on a quick tour aside because it's quite relevant to the Forbidden Sun and Vegapunk and all of One Piece, potentially the One Piece itself. This entire concept here seems to parallel the Greek story of Daedalus and Icarus. If you're not familiar, Daedalus was a master inventor who was imprisoned in a tower with his son Icarus. They escaped one day by using wax wings to sail over the sea, but Icarus got way too carried away and flew way too high, way too close to the sun, causing his wings to melt and him falling into the sea, losing his life. Now, the morale of the story was to show how people need to heed warnings, stay humble, and not give in to temptation or reckless ambition. Because in this story, Icarus is so caught up in his own freedom and, the wonders of technology. Something I want you to remember is a key aspect of the One Piece story overall, that he just straight up ignores his father's warnings and flies too close to the sun. And it does seem like someone in the One Piece world, perhaps Imu, didn't heed the warning of the gods either and touched this Forbidden Sun and was then struck down for their ambition. Plus, Vegapunk himself actually says that he flew too close to the sun, creating the Mother Flame replica, a perfect on-the-nose reference connecting these stories. And I would assume that this would have to apply to the creator of the original Forbidden Sun themselves as well. And since they did that, something would probably need to strike them down, like, I don't know, a massive hell flame serpent thing, perhaps, monster. And that's why I think it would be totally reasonable for Oda to create a giant world-destroying kaiju, a defender or byproduct of the Forbidden Sun, that exists solely to prevent people from using it and accidentally blowing themselves up. And alongside Nika, they cast the world into shadows, destroying the ancient kingdom that uses its power. Now, in my humble opinion, that would be absolutely legendary on Oda's part, because the opening scenes of Egghead Island could have literally foreshadowed this very thing. Remember, we saw a giant monster-like beast fighting a giant Gundam mech suit. So what if this was a subtle or not so subtle nod to what actually happened way back in time? That would be pretty damn awesome. It also reminds me of a funny story, because I actually destroyed an ancient kingdom once before myself using a giant mech suit. That was like in 1999, I think. But then, as its god, I rebuilt it anew. And that's actually the origin story of the Ohara Patreon, and I serve as its sun god. So if you want more sun god Manu action, I mean, hopefully that doesn't mean my hair turning white, but I'm talking about things like early access to chapter reviews, Patreon exclusive member content, and access to, you know, all the channel's art assets and early cuts of My Drink Sake podcast. If that sounds interesting and you want to help support us what we do here, consider becoming a Patreon. I personally think you would absolutely love it if you enjoy videos like these. Almost as much as I love the idea that I'm getting way too complicated with things and that the truth might just be pretty damn simple. Because the third idea for what the Eternal Flame could be lies deep below the surface. Let's just cut to the chase, guys. I think it's quite likely that Oda might just be grounding himself with things, and he'll make the Forbidden Sun straight up the Earth's core. Now, I know, it's not as crazy or fancy or fun or anything as some of the other ideas, but I wouldn't be a good theorist if I didn't cover the very obvious option here. I mean, yeah. And as I said, it should be in the Earth's core based on the mural, and so it just straight up being the Earth's regular magma core or iron core would make a ton of sense. It could just be that the ancient industrial kingdom needed a way stronger fuel source, and they dug so deep that they accessed the planet's regular center. Again, let me tie this into our real world, because geothermal energy is a pretty big deal, so it probably would be in the One Piece world too if they were technologically advanced enough. But maybe when they started using it, it came at a cost. If they overused it, the planet's whole gravity field and regular core would possibly be messed up or cooled down, and there's a pretty good chance, in my mind, that Nika came down to prevent humanity from making an irreversible mistake by running out of their, most essential resource, kind of how, the Sky People might have run out of resources on their planet or the moon as well. But I don't want to just stay grounded here. I want to soar high into the sky, close to the sun, and cover all the most interesting and fun possibilities about this. And admittedly, I gotta say that this next one is the most outlandish one I'm gonna talk about, but maybe also the most fun. I just kind of feel like these have all been super cool sci-fi or grounded theories so far, and I do want to shoot for the moon here, or I guess the stars with this next one. And the secret to it lies within Luffy's Gear 5 form. Now, Gear 5 is very cartoonish and silly. It's basically total slapstick and flips everything that we know about the world completely on its head. Using it, Luffy does things that straight up break the laws of physics, like creating matter out of thin air, grabbing lightning out of the sky, or turning his own hair into goggles or baseball bats. It really is a power unlike anything else we've ever seen, and kind of seems to let him quite literally bend the rules of the world however he sees fit. And when you really think about it, the stretching and rubber aspect of Luffy only gets crazier and crazier over time. I mean, what started as punches and axe kicks turned into giant limbs, Snake Man forms, and now the Sun God itself. And seeing as these are originally all Nika's powers, the god who probably saved the world when the Forbidden Sun was first misused, what if it's all of these powers that actually reveal the true identity of the Eternal and Forbidden Flame to begin with? Now, don't get me wrong here, I don't think that Nika just created a perfect power source out of thin air with his rubbery powers. I think he did something even crazier and maybe even sillier. I want to talk about the idea here that Nika with his incredibly stretchy body, reached into the sky and just straight up grabbed a piece of the sun itself. Now, I know that at first glance this sounds super dumb, but I do think that when you really think about it, it might be the point here. I mean, One Piece is a comedic story by default. It's full of silly gags and convoluted solutions to problems. Milk fixes teeth in this world, and meat instantly heals wounds. You know, it's kind of like Popeye Logic 101, and seeing as Luffy is the next Joy Boy, who was the next Nika, I do think that this element will ring very true throughout the entire One Piece history and be a core element of its entire story. These are some weird guys who do stupid, funny, unrealistic things, and what is more comic book and silly than reaching past the panel and grabbing the actual sun? You know, it would be the ultimate comedic gag. Again, of course, it is silly, but I also think that Oda might be pulling some inspiration here from his idol, one of the greatest mangaka of all time, with this idea as well, because if Oda did make Nika go super silly and stretch his arms all the way to the sun and back, it would be an amazing tribute and callback to the works of Akira Toriyama. It would also be a direct reference to Luffy's origins through Sun Wukong and Hanuman, because Oda has gone on record now multiple times throughout the years to say that Dragon Ball and Dr. Slump very much inspired his story. And in case you didn't know, this little girl Arale here is the main character of Akira Toriyama's manga before Dragon Ball, and she just low diffs Goku easily. And no, I'm not kidding, literally, they exist in the very same universe, and she always kicks his butt whenever they cross paths. Basically, she's a comic relief character, a gag character way too strong for her own good, and wouldn't you know it, grabbing the sun out of the sky is literally one of the silliest gags in Dr. Slump. Arale just goes up and pokes it up with a pitchfork. And now, just because she does it does not mean that Nika did or will do it. I just kind of wanted to point out that this is something right up there with the Gear 5 alley, you know, with the comedic weirdness. Silly, weird Dr. Slump style humor is basically the backbone of all of Gear 5. But as I said, it's not so silly that it's just a stretch. See what I did there? Fun One Piece joke. All right. Hanuman, one of the monkey god kings who inspired Luffy as well, has his origin always revolve around reaching up and grasping the sun as well. In fact, in some versions of the story, he grabs it and eats it. In some others, he leaps to it and burns, and this is his origin. Very similar to how Luffy eats the sun god fruit, Hanuman eats the sun. And I gotta say that this origin of the monkey god is pretty clearly something that Oda wanted us to form connections with as well. After all, the ultimate move that Luffy uses when unlocking Gear 5, his Nika form, is the Byron gun. And this move is named after yet another name for Hanuman, Bairang Bali, I think is how you pronounce that word. I am so sorry. And if that's not enough to convince you, it isn't just a goofy idea. I think it's pretty damn clear at this point that Oda was somewhat inspired to give Luffy his rubber powers to connect him with Sun Wukong. Because it's not exactly a new idea that Luffy's rubber powers are modeled after Sun Wukong's stretchy staff, the Rui Jinguban. Now this staff can stretch infinitely long and has pierced the heavens many times. Some of its best feats include reaching the sun and going far past that to lift up and support the entire galaxy. So I don't think it's exactly insane to think that Oda could have drawn inspiration from these gods and one of his heroes to give us a version of Nika who reached far off into space and just grabbed a piece of the sun for his own planet. I think it's very fun, very silly, and has enough mythological inspiration and backup to work and still feel right for One Piece. Plus, it just opens up the door for Luffy to do the very same thing and use the flames from the sun for a massive punch that defeats Imu someday maybe. You know, literally grabbing the dawn and bringing the dawn. I do stand by my idea that he might do this, and if he does, you all owe me $5. Unless you're sub to the Patreon, then, you know, I'm gonna let it slide. If I'm wrong, I will make a video in shame. But now, I must admit to you that as cool as this idea is, they are not my favorite options. None of the ones so far. Because of course, as a real good YouTuber, I've been saving the best one for last. The reason I say that is because While all of these previous mentioned options do meet the qualifications that I established at the beginning of this video, they are all just fragments of this one big final idea. That's right, I think that in every way, the ideas I've been proposing could all be true at the same time. Because it's now time for me to present to you my grand theory, the one I'm almost certain is probably, definitely, maybe the truth. I believe that the Forbidden Sun is actually a Dyson sphere. I know, crazy, right? And right now you might be wondering what the hell even is a Dyson sphere? Good point, I should have explained that. All right, allow me to ease your mind here. A Dyson sphere is a theoretical concept from science fiction. It was first proposed way back in 1937, the year your mom was born, by the way, by Olaf Stapledon in his novel Star Maker. But the term Dyson sphere was actually coined when Freeman Dyson, a physicist, published a paper researching the idea in 1960. Now you might be saying, Manu, you didn't explain anything, I just almost fell asleep right now. So what actually is it? Well, it's a giant megastructure that is built around a star, encapsulating it, harvesting its entire heat and power, and basically making it usable as energy. Like, kind of imagine you just layered solar panels around the sun, but like really close to it. That's kind of the idea here. Ever since their first introduction, tons of them have appeared in science fiction as the ultimate power source. And as a result, I do think that this could very well be where Oda has been pointing at with the Forbidden Sun as well. And the reason I think that it's more likely that the One Piece planet was actually built around a star and is harvesting its power instead of being a piece of the sun, a nuclear reactor, or Nika's flame, is because of this image right here. See the infamous solar system model in the library of Ohara? Now that model shows everything circling around the One Piece planet. And we do have a word for this. It's the so-called geocentric model of the solar system where, you know, the planets, the sun, and the moon all orbit the main body, which is Earth. We ourselves used to think that that's how our planet worked for a long time until scientists realized that we actually orbit the sun. That's known as the heliocentric model for the solar system that I think was coined by Copernicus, but I might be wrong here. Now, due to gravity, that's the only way the solar system really works, unless I guess a planet would be unbelievably large and is even bigger than its star, which then it would just become a star. That's kind of how that works. But this model could work if the planet in question was actually built around the star. Suddenly, it would make way more sense for the One Piece solar system to be geocentric because it's actually not. It is still heliocentric, we just don't see the real sun since it's still inside the planet. Now this would, for example, also explain why the One Piece world seems to be so damn big. It would have to be if it was built around even a smaller star, and this might also tie into why the Gorosei, who are named after planets, seem to orbit and follow the Earth god Imu. It might be a tie-in into the fact that the Earth itself could be the sun. It's just that the sun and the sun god are currently eclipsed. And of course, it would also mean that what we think is the moon, where Enel finds the ancient civilization, is actually a straight-up planet that ran out of resources and, you know, they came down to the blue planet, which might be fake. But it's more than even just that. All of the other theories we've talked about so far feed into this one here as well. A super advanced scientist would have to create something like this and then make sure that it stays safe. And to me, the perfect idea here is Nika. This is his flame, just not the literal one on his back. But it could be the other way around. It could be that the first Lunarian flames were pieces of the sun that then meshed with their bloodline elements or something like that. I don't know, it's still a fantasy story. Could be a cool addition. Plus, do you remember where I said that nuclear fusion does naturally occur? Inside of the sun, of stars, our sun. And so all of the same logic around flooding the world to cool the core, you know, more and more over time, and how giant creatures would appear still applies here as well. Now, I don't think I need to explain how the idea that it might be the Earth's core applies here, as it literally just would be a stand-in for a literal star. The Earth's core is still a core. It's just also, you know, in this case, the sun, which just leaves the whole Nika grabbed a piece of it idea, and that also still works, just in reverse. Instead of Nika using his rubber powers to bring the sun to him, he may have grabbed a piece of the core and put it into orbit into the sky. That way, the surface world would still have some light, and if that's the case, the geocentric model still appears correctly with a sun in orbit. Or I guess the One Piece solar system could just be a binary star system. Now, all this truly means is that the ancient history of the world is incredibly advanced, and it would make sense that Nika would come down to free the slaves if they were accessing the Dyson sphere itself. It clearly would have massive importance, and if its power actually dipped, maybe something really big or really bad would actually happen to the entire planet. Or maybe hiding the sun inside the Dyson sphere is essential to prevent an even greater threat from appearing. If you watch the channel a lot, you probably might know that I've talked about both of these ideas on my Drink Sake podcast, but I do love the idea that everything happening in the One Piece world is actually done to prevent an even bigger and even badder evil from appearing. Who knows, maybe Nika and Imu had to work together to build this Dyson sphere to prevent something way off in space from attacking, or as a way to conquer the entire galaxy. Again, at first glance, this seems kind of insane, but we do know that space pirates do exist from other planets. So wouldn't it just be awesome if the origins of the ancient kingdom lay in space piracy instead of regular ocean piracy? I don't know, I personally just feel like this idea ticks all the boxes and falls very well in line with everything that we've learned about the ancient kingdom during the Elbaf and the Egghead Island arc so far. But I also think that there's a ton more to learn about before we get the final answers here. Like, what is up with Imu and the Celestial Dragons? Seriously, why are they called that? And why is there a massive dragon also in this mural on Elbaf connected to all of this? Well, I think I might have figured that one out as well. I think that Imu is the dragon, and I think I can prove it to you. Oh, what? You don't believe me? Check out this video right now and find out if I'm lying or not. And otherwise, as always, thanks so much for watching, and thank you so much to all you great Patreon members. Patreon members. Yeah, go check that out as well, and I will see you in the next one, and let me know your thoughts in the comments.